काजी में। अब हमारे साथ शामिल हैं किम्बल कैरियो, पीपल वॉइस अखबार के एडिटर, और उनको आज स्टूडियो में बुलाने की वजह यह है कि रेसिज्म के खिलाफ जो हमारा कैंपेन चल रहा है उसके बारे में पहले भी हमने पिछले साल भी उनके साथ बात की थी, और काफ़ी उनकी पकड़ है, रेसिज्म के खिलाफ लिखते भी हैं, बोलते भी हैं। और इस बार ये हुआ कि जो पिछले संडे को जो रेसिज्म के खिलाफ रैली हुई वैंकूवर में, जिसमें दोष लग रहे हैं कि सोल्जर्स ऑफ ओडिन नाम का जो ग्रुप है वाइट सुप्रीमिस्ट का, वो वहां पे हाजिर था। उन लोगों ने वहां पे गुरशागर्दी की, लोगों को डराया। किम्बल कैरी जो एक बुजुर्ग हैं, उनको भी डराया गया जब वो मार्च में शामिल हो रहे थे। सो ही इज गोइंग टू गिव अस अ फर्स्ट हैंड एक्सपीरियंस। इसके अलावा जो हमारी कैंपेन है रेसिज्म पे, वो जनरली बात भी करेंगे। किम्बल, थैंक्स फॉर बीइंग अ गेस्ट।
Very glad to be here.
So Kimball, let's begin with your first-hand experience with white supremacists at the rally last Sunday. What exactly happened?
Well, I was near the back of the march as it went down Hastings Street towards Victory Square. I was helping to watch traffic to make sure that everybody was safe near the end of the march. When suddenly this fellow came up to me and asked me what the march was about. I told him it was an anti-racism march to mark the day for elimination of racial discrimination. He says, "Oh, so why are there banners with hammers and sickles on them in the march?" I said, "Well, there are some communists in the march. They're opposed to racism." He said, "Well, no, they aren't." I said, "Well, yes, they are, as a matter of fact." He said, "Well, they shouldn't be in this march. What about Putin?" I was very surprised by this. I said, "What does Mr. Putin have to do with anything?" And he starts going on about Putin. I said, "Well, you know, he has nothing to do with this march. He is a racist bigot too." "Oh, no, he's not," this fellow says. I said, "Well, yes, he is, as a matter of fact." And the guy says, "No, he simply wants immigrants to be vetted properly going into Russia." I said, "Oh, vetted properly, this phrase." I said, "And who vetted your ancestors when they came to Canada?" He says, "Oh, my ancestors were vetted properly." I said, "By who? What are you talking about?" He says, "Well, I'm a descendant of John A. Macdonald." To which I said, and probably I should have kept my mouth shut, but I blurted out, "Oh, John A. Macdonald, the Prime Minister who murdered Louis Riel, the leader of the Métis. Maybe your ancestors shouldn't have been led into this country." And he immediately started to want to engage me in a fight. He puts his fists up and he starts saying, let's do it right here, right now, right in the street. And by this time he's got 5 or 6 of his buddies hanging around, guys in these sort of black outfits with these weird symbols on. Well, I find out later these are members of the Soldiers of Odin. And they are deliberately picking fights with people along the route to the march. I said to them, "You're really going to pick a fight with an old guy who looks like Santa Claus right here in the middle of Hastings Street with the police watching?" And by this time other people had come up and we continued. Well, we got to Victory Square, and as you know, at Victory Square, these folks, they threw a smoke bomb into the crowd. They were deliberately trying to pick fights, antagonize people, provoke people, rushing towards the place where the speakers were, generally trying to disrupt the event and stop it from going ahead. And the police watched all of this, did nothing to intervene until finally they did haul away a couple of people who'd been starting fights, took them away in handcuffs, and let them go a short time later, and after the march was over, upon which they apparently tried to get into fights with some of the people leaving the march. So it was quite a scene, very aggressive attempt to disrupt the activity and start violence.
But since you are giving this first-hand experience, did you ever try to approach the police, or what was the police response?
Well, at one point during the rally itself at Victory Square, there was a standoff of a number of people trying to block one of these Soldiers of Odin from getting closer to the speakers, and I was one of the people sort of gathered around helping to do this, and I turned to one of the police officers standing right there watching this, and I said, "You know, less than half an hour ago, that guy and some of his friends were threatening to beat me up right in the middle of Hastings Street. And, you know, why aren't you doing something about these people?" And he says, "Well, we're here now, and they're not going to do anything now that we're here." I thought, well, I thought that was a very weak response, to be honest.
So how does it reflect on the police department? Do you think that police is not doing enough to tackle these kind of people, or they just want to stay away, or they are in a way, I don't want to use that term, but in a way complicit with these kind of fellows?
There's a bigger problem in this society around this question. The usual attitude of police forces in this country, including in Vancouver in my experience, is that when there are attempts by these ultra-right groups, neo-Nazis and racists, when they attack people or break up rallies and this sort of thing, the usual response of the police is that both sides are at fault. You people are simply confronting one another, et cetera, and we're not going to pick sides. In other words, they adopt this position of what they consider to be neutrality until an actual crime has been committed, what they consider to be a crime. In my view, people who are trying to do these sort of things, they are committing hate crimes. They are inciting violence against racialized communities. They're inciting violence against immigrants, inciting violence against political radicals. And they have engaged in this violence many times. You know, I have good friends in Calgary, for example, whose home was attacked a number of times. Firebombs thrown at them. And one occasion, masked men broke in and beat them up rather badly. And nobody was ever charged for these crimes. And the attitude of the police in Calgary was, well, you know, you brought this on yourself by challenging these neo-Nazis politically. You should just stay away, leave them alone.
Why do you think they have not charged anyone for hate crime in the first place? Despite all this glaring evidence, they threatened you, they threw a firebomb, and they were trying to wade into the crowd, and they were trying to trigger the problem in the first place. So why do you think they have not been charged for hate crime in the first place?
Well, I can't answer for the police. I'm not sure what exactly the problem is. I do know, as I said, that this reflects a wider problem in society. This is a racist society right from its very origins, and this is built into the DNA of Canadian life. That sort of the default position is that this is a white Christian country. And anybody who upsets this historical understanding is somehow a troublemaker, is at fault, is probably some kind of a person who is up to no good in some way. You know, there are laws against hate crimes on the books in this country, but they're so rarely used that, you know, literally you have to have a mountain of evidence that somebody has spoken in a particular way, made it very clear that they are directing hatred against a particular identifiable group of people, advocating violence or having, you know, used violence and physically attacked people on the basis of their color or religion. It becomes, you know, the bar is set extremely high for bringing charges in cases of hate crimes. And the rest of the time, the police, the attitude is, as I said, that they are neutral and these people should just leave each other alone.
Well,
it's an odd situation, especially considering, you know, anti-racists in this country. It would be difficult to find cases where an anti-racist organization or individual has committed some violent act against one of these neo-Nazi groups. It simply doesn't happen. But there are many cases of the reverse.
do you think whatever happened past Sunday was an outcome of what is happening across the border? Because we have been witnessing these rallies for a number of years now. We have been hearing about these similar stories emerging from Calgary or Edmonton, but this was like more or less unheard of in Vancouver. What are your thoughts, Kimball?
It's true. Since the election of Trump, there's been a real upsurge in various types of hate crimes, distribution of hate literature, actual calls for collective punishment of certain groups in the population, especially calls to deport Muslims, to get them all out of Canada, to shut down their places of worship, on a scale that has not been seen in this country in a long time. And it was shocking in a way to see these soldiers of Odin and members of the UBC Free Speech Club, which is a like-minded group, to see them actually come out to an event in Vancouver and attempt to create these kind of provocations. Because, there's a sort of more radicalized political community in Vancouver. People are more likely to challenge these types of groups, and people felt somewhat safer going to rallies of this type here than they might have in other places. So yeah, it was rather a shock to a lot of people. But on the other hand, there's a long history of this kind of stuff in Canada. It comes and goes, but it seems as though it's been stimulated by the events in the United States, and perhaps in Europe to some degree. There's a very large racist, anti-immigrant, Islamophobic movement in Quebec, for example, which is tied to the events that are going on in France and to some degree in the rest of Western Europe. There is one organization in Quebec which claims it has 40,000 members, Le Mout, and it's organized on a military basis, and it is demanding the expulsion of Muslims. I don't know whether they actually have 40,000 members or not. Sometimes these people wildly exaggerate. But there are rather frightening developments taking place across the country.
Definitely. Well, it's time for a quick traffic update, and we'll be back after this. And Safia Prani and Inderpal Brar might have some questions for you.